Come on in. We can make space for you 10:30. Yeah, just slide over. Tell people you have seats available. Everybody doing okay with that sunshine being out? Anybody offended by that at all? No, me either. So you're like, you've been praying in church all these these rainy Sundays, but you knew, even though you were tempted not to come to church because of the sun, that if you keep coming and keep praying, maybe it will stay out. And so glad that you're here. Here's the thing: everyone lives for something. Or another way to say it is, everyone makes their life about something, and whatever it is that you make your life about, this becomes the mission of your life. And there's one big question we're asking over the next 30 minutes, and it's this question: is the mission of your life a grand mission or a mini mission? Is the mission of your life a grand mission or a mini mission? I'm not asking this morning, does the world think your mission is amazing? I'm not asking this morning, will this mission get you a lot of fame or notoriety? I'm not even asking, will the mission lead to vast wealth or to more Instagram followers? Because here's why. All of those things could actually be present in the midst of a mini mission. What I'm asking today is this: as far as you understand it, are you locked in to the God-given mission of your life? And the reason I want to give my all to answering that question for us today is this: there is nothing as significant as being in on the thing God created you to do with your life. And there's nothing as sad to me as missing out on the thing that God created us to do with our lives. And so what I want to do as we continue Esther's series is to show you the difference between a grand mission and a mini mission. And if you've not been tracking with us, go back and get the podcast. But we're in week 3 of our Made for This series. We're looking at the life of Esther. And just to catch you up to speed, Esther, she grows up losing both of her parents. Her first cousin Mordecai adopts her, and he becomes her adopted father. Super cool story. We're all for adoption here, personally and communally as a church. And so if we can help you with that, let us know. But she's raised by Mordecai, her first cousin turned adopted father. And so they're on this track. And eventually the king needs a new queen. And lo and behold, Esther's the one who becomes the queen. Out of hundreds of contestants, kind of in a supersized bachelor competition, Esther wins the queenship, and she becomes the queen. Let's keep making room for people. As they keep rolling in, we're making space. We're all about that. And so Esther becomes queen, and simultaneously, as she becomes queen, there's a guy named Haman who rises in the ranks of the king's cabinet. And so Esther's there in the palace. Haman's becoming the first number one official, save the king in the cabinet of the king. And so what happens is Haman wants everyone to bow down when he enters a room. And so if he were to show up, he would expect us to bow down before him. And everyone in the Persian Empire bows down with the exception of Mordecai. Mordecai is a Jew, so we assume for religious purposes he doesn't bow down to Haman. And Haman is furious about this, so much so that he wants to kill Mordecai and kill all of the Jews. So he doesn't just want to eradicate Mordecai, he wants to kill all of the Jews. Mordecai becomes aware of this decree, and so he begs Esther to go to the king and beg the king for mercy. Hey, let the king know your people are going to die. Speak up on behalf of the Jews. And she eventually decides to go. And she goes because Mordecai prompts her. Here's what he's prompting her to do. He's saying, Esther, I know you're the queen, but don't settle for just being queen. Even though the queen looks like a grand mission, just being the queen to be the queen, that's a mini mission. Leverage your position as queen. That's the grand mission that God has for your life. And so if you have a Bible, Esther chapter 5, if you need one, just raise a hand and we will get one to you. Esther chapter 5 sits between, obviously chapter 4 and chapter 6, but Esther comes between Nehemiah and Job. Just keep those hands up, and otherwise you can look at the screens, you can look at your phones. Esther chapter 5, and what I want you to see is she puts everything on the line. Remember, if she goes to the king without being called by the king might murder her. That's what's at stake here. And so Esther chapter 5 is going to walk us into this moment, and it's also going to show us the distinction between a grand mission and a mini mission. So stand with me as we look at Esther chapter 5, all 14 verses, but it's a story. It will flow quickly. If you get exhausted around verse 7 or 8, have a seat. But we will all know. So she's moving into this big moment. Everything's on the line, and it says this. Remember, she said to Mordecai, let's fast for 3 days. I and my attendants will fast. Find all the Jews who will fast. And then after 3 days, I'm going to the king. If you've got space on your row, we got some seats up here on the second row. Artist circle, but no extra charge today. Come on up. Seriously. This is fun. You guys know we have 2 other gatherings in case you ever get claustrophobic at the 10:30. And those gatherings are doing well also. Very fun. So here's the 3rd day. On the 3rd day, Esther put on her royal robes and stood in the inner court of the palace in front of the king's hall. The king was sitting on his royal throne in the hall facing the entrance. When he saw Queen Esther standing in the court, he was pleased with her and held out to her the gold scepter that was in his hand. So Esther approached and touched the tip of the scepter. Then the king asked, "What is it, Queen Esther? What is your request? Even up to half the kingdom, it will be given you." "If it pleases the king," replied Esther, "let the king, together with Haman," that's our guy, "come today to a banquet that I have prepared for him." "Bring Haman at once," the king said, "so that we may do what Esther asked." So the king and Haman went to the banquet Esther had prepared. As they were drinking wine, the king again asked Esther, "Now what is your petition? It will be given you. And what is your request? Even up to half the kingdom, it will be granted." Verse 7, Esther replied, "My petition and my request is this: if the king regards me with favor, and if it pleases the king to grant my petition and fulfill my request, let the king and Haman come tomorrow to the banquet I will prepare for them. Then I will answer the king's question." Haman went out that day happy and in high spirits, of course. But when he saw Mordecai at the king's gate and observed that he neither rose nor showed fear in his presence, he was filled with rage against Mordecai. Nevertheless, Haman restrained himself and went home. Calling together his friends and Zeresh, his wife, Haman boasted to them about his vast wealth, his many sons, and all the ways the king had honored him, and how he had elevated him above the other nobles and officials. Listen to this. "And that's not all," Haman added. "I'm the only person Queen Esther invited to accompany the king to the banquet she gave, and she has invited me along with the king tomorrow. But all this gives me no satisfaction as long as I see that Jew, Mordecai, sitting at the king's gate." Last verse, verse 14. His wife Zeresh and all his friends said to him, "Have a pole set up, reaching to a height of 50 cubits, and ask the king in the morning to have Mordecai impaled on it. Then go with the king to the banquet and enjoy yourself." The suggestion delighted Haman, and he had the pole set up. Before you have a seat, any man whose friends and wife think that he can impel a man on a pole 75 feet in the air and go enjoy himself at a party tells you everything they think about this man. Have a seat. It's like, yo, and then just go enjoy yourself. Impel the man, then go enjoy yourself. Well, Esther comes into this moment, and she goes for the grand mission narrative. She is going for it. She is putting all her chips to the middle of the table, and you remember her saying that real pronounced moment last week, "If I perish, I perish." I'm going for it. I'm not just going to be queen just to be queen. I'm going to leverage my position for the sake of where God has placed me for his purposes and for the good of others. She moves into the grand mission narrative that God has for her life. But you can imagine that everyone else in the kingdom would have assumed that she already was living the grand mission, right? Like if you look at Esther's life, like we look at our own lives, you're going, she's grand mission material already. She has attendants and servants waiting on her hand and foot 24/7. Who wouldn't want that, right? She lives in the most protected home in the entire Persian Empire. Grand mission. She's the one that has valuable treasures and possessions. My goodness sakes, she's the queen. She was chosen queen over everyone else. Grand mission, grand mission, grand mission. But Mordecai says to her, if you stop there, if you put a stop sign right there where God wants to put another green light for you to do more than what you've done so far, that's mini mission, Esther. So finally, she resolves that she will step into the grand mission narrative. And I wonder how many of us are putting stop signs where God wants to put a green light. How many of us are going, of course, this is the whole end. This is everything. And God's going, no, it's everything you need to use to leverage for what I really have you doing this for. He tried to help Esther see that, and she realizes it, and she resolves, and she steps into this moment. And there's this incredible thing that we just read where it says, when the king saw her, he was pleased with her. Because remember, we're rallying around this idea of whatever opposition that's large and authoritative that you face as you try to pursue God's mission for your life. Here's what we want to rally under. Proverbs 21:1. In the Lord's hand, the king's heart is a stream of water that he channels toward all who please him. That's what's going on in this moment. Remember Esther. She's walking into this moment with the king, knowing that he could have her murdered right on the spot. And instead of killing her, he offers her up to half the kingdom. It's a pretty good exchange, right? Anyone ever walked into a meeting where you expected to get fired and you got a promotion? Anybody? Seriously? All right. So the 9 o'clockers, they are coming to church early because they're so grateful. They were in that moment. And so she's expecting, they come early so they can get that interview process on, but she's expecting, she knows what's at stake. She knows, just like we can remember from week 1, she knows what happened to the last queen that didn't get on board with the king's rules. She was deposed. And instead of being killed, she's offered up to half the kingdom. And Esther's very different than me, and I'm guessing very different than most of you. Anybody else terrible at patience? Great. Anybody terrible at lying in church at all? So she's so patient. The king's like, what do you want? And she's like, come to a party. They come to the party. She's like, come to the party the next day. I'm thinking, he may change his mind and kill me. What do I want? Here's what I want, Mr. King. Right? She's like, just come to a banquet. And then she's like, come to a different banquet. But she knows something in her realization of her grand mission that we need to lean into today. And it's this: to accomplish our God-given mission in life, divine intervention becomes a necessity. Say it again. To accomplish our God-given mission in life, divine intervention becomes a necessity. You will never pull off God's mission for your life all by yourself. So when you think about the position that you've assumed, the mission you've assumed for your life, and you think, I can do this all by myself, let me say this to you. It doesn't matter if Forbes writes about you. It doesn't matter if everyone in your industry looks to you as a leader. If you can pull off the mission all by yourself, it's not God's mission. No matter how public or private the thing is that God has for you, no matter how big or small it is, no matter the scale of your platform, if you can pull it off by yourself, that is not the grand mission that God has for your life. That's a mini mission, no matter how you want to dress it up. Haman's not so interested in a God-given mission, is he? No. But he's completely, thank you. People are like, rhetorical or not, should I? He's not interested in his God-given mission, but he's completely interested and fascinated in a Haman-driven mission. And here's one of the things that you and I see in Haman's life, but we oftentimes miss in our own lives. It's this. It is easy for us to deceive ourselves into thinking that our mini-mission is, in fact, a grand mission. Right? You see it in Haman's life, you see it in your boss's life, you see it in your friends or your enemies' lives, but you oftentimes miss it in yours. The thing that looks dressed up like a mini mission, like a grand mission, it might in fact be a mini mission. If you look at what Haman has, he has everything, doesn't he? He's the number one guy, except for the king and the queen. He's number one in the kingdom. When he walks into a room, everyone bows down. This guy, my guess, since birth, he had this insatiable desire to be needed and recognized and approved of. Know anybody like that? And everyone approves of him. So he walks in a space, they bow down. Except for Mordecai, he doesn't bow down. Now, I said last week, if everyone's bowing down when I walk in a room except for you, I'm pretty good with those percentages. I'm doing pretty well, right? I don't know about you, but no one bows down when I walk, thankfully, right? Thankfully. But he can't stand the fact that one guy, see, when you have this need to be known, and it is the desire for approval that's driving your life, and some of us, we're all tempted with that, by the way, not just some of us, I think all of us are tempted with that, then even if the king applauds you, even if the king promotes you, even if 99.9% of everyone thinks you're amazing, and there's one person who doesn't think you're amazing, you've got to go after that one person. And that's what he does. But first it says he restrains himself, like, way to go, Haman, you didn't kill anybody yet. He restrains himself, and then he goes home. And when he gets home, he calls his friends and his wife Zeresh, but he doesn't call them to the table to ask them, how was your day? He doesn't call them to the table to say, hey, while I was at the palace, what was going on in your world? What does he call them to the table to tell them? I am rich. I have many sons. And I'm sure Zeresh is like, really? I had no clue. As you probably didn't have a clue about some of them. But I had no idea that you had so many sons. You are amazing, right? And they're just like, and he's probably making his wife and his friends bow down. And he's like, all right, guys, cut it out. No, seriously, go for it again. And this is just who Haman is. And then he begins to say, can you believe that I'm elevated above everyone else in the entire Persian kingdom? That's a pretty big thing. And then in verse 12, he goes, and what's more? Esther's having a banquet. Obviously, she's inviting the king, but she's only inviting the king and one other person. Can any of you guess who it is? It's me. It's me. I know you never could have guessed because I talk about so many other people, but it's me. It's me. And he has this need for everyone to think he's a big deal. And everyone who would look at his life would go, man, that really is a grand mission. I mean, can you imagine if Haman had a Twitter account back in the day? Can't you see this guy walking around the entire kingdom with the portable selfie stick? Right? Like, look, I just walked into the market and they just fell down. Or sitting at the table with Esther and the king, like, is anybody else here or is it just us? And then he comments on his own Instagram post, it's just us. Sorry, you bunch of losers. It's just us. It's just me. You would think everyone else would feel like they're an awkward third wheel. Not me, because I'm Haman. I just need to be at the table. And that's how he lived his entire life. And what's fascinating about this to me is that if it can happen to Haman, then it can happen to me. And it can happen to you. And let me tell you how we try to classify things for our lives. We try to look at certain industries or professions or even ministry, and we say anyone in that position, that's a grand mission, and we look at someone in a different thing and think, oh, that must be a mini mission. But most of our positions in life are neutral in and of themselves. Like the position of being a mom, that's neutral in and of itself. It doesn't become grand or many by itself. If you're an entrepreneur, that's going to be an awesome event. But just being an entrepreneur, that doesn't make you a grand mission. I'm a pastor. That doesn't make me have a grand mission or a mini mission. It's a neutral position when I get into my motivation, why I do what I do, when I get into my character, how I do what I do, then all of a sudden you can detect and I can detect, oh, that's more of a grand mission. That's more of a mini mission. And here's the thing. When I say that, oh, if your position brings you a ton of wealth, we can assume that's a grand mission, but it might be a mini mission. The question you have to ask is not what do I have, what position am I in, how many followers, how much money, how much influence. That's not the question you and I have to ask. We have to ask, for what? And what am I going to do with it? And so whether you, again, are publicly having a position or privately, whether you have 1 million people who know your whereabouts or only 4 people who know what you're up to in your life, none of that makes it grand or mini on its own. But what are you doing with it? What are you doing? How are you stewarding? How are you leveraging? How are you influencing with the influence you've been given and the resources you've been given? What are you doing with it? And then you begin to understand, oh, I think I'm in that grand category and I need to keep stepping in that, or I need to step away from the mini stuff that I've been doing when I look at my life and step into a grand mission. So what's your why? Why do you do what you do? How are you thinking about your position the way that you're thinking about it? And in this moment with Haman and maybe even your own mission, I want to make sure I don't get this right, but a mini mission might have the world's approval while receiving the disapproval of God. Let me say it again. We can get so deceived. So a mini mission might have everyone applauding for you because you're really a leader, you're somebody that we want to know, and yet God might disapprove of that, and the reverse is true as well. A grand mission might not get the approval of the world, but it will get the approval of God. That's what we're after. And just so you don't hear me wrongly, you can be wealthy and have a grand mission or a mini mission. You can be in poverty and have a grand mission or a mini mission. You can work at a church, you can work in a business, you can be a parent, you can be a grandparent, you can be a leader in our church and still be in it for mini mission narratives or for grand mission narratives, and only you really know what sits at the heart of your motivation. What am I doing and why am I doing what I'm doing? That's where you really begin to get to the heart of it. So in this moment, if you would agree with me, I think there are 2 missions that intersect, right? Esther's mission and Haman's mission. And obviously, they're going to continue to intersect over the last couple of weeks of this series. And as these 2 missions intersect, what you begin to see is the very distinctions that come with grand mission and the distinctions that come with mini mission. So let me just show you some of those things from their lives. Esther goes for it, and she acts on behalf of the people. When Haman goes for it, he only acts on his own behalf. Esther, hear this, she is willing to sacrifice her life. If I perish, I perish for the good of everyone else. So she's offering to sacrifice her life for everyone else's good. Haman's willing to sacrifice everyone else for his own good. So what's the difference? Here's the difference. A grand mission starts with God. A mini mission starts with me. A grand mission is lived out for God's glory. A mini mission is lived out for my glory. A grand mission is always about the good of others, not just yourself. Look at Joseph. Look at Moses. Look at Nehemiah. Look at Esther. Look at Paul. Look at Jesus. But a mini mission is always about the good of self and only about the good of self. Look at Pharaoh. Look at King Nebuchadnezzar. Look at the life of Judas. What's your mission about? You see, Haman, he uses his position just for the sake of the position. But Esther, she realizes God doesn't give us things just to give us things so that there's a stop sign after he gives us things. He gives us things so that we can employ those things and deploy those things into the world that he's called us to. And we said this last week, God never positions us just for the sake of the position. Wherever your position is, God never positions you just for the sake of the position. And I can tell you so many stories that we've heard just this week, but let me give you one that kind of capped off my week. Our church started at the W Hotel, and we were there between February 2011 and August 2011. We would meet at 6, or once we got really good at it, Brad, we met at like 7, once we were really good at setting up at the W Hotel. And then we would do an 11 o'clock service after all that set up. But after we set up initially and the band would begin to practice, I would go to the Starbucks on Howard and 3rd, the closest one to the W Hotel. And I just happened to be served by a barista, and I just happened to do that barista's wedding last night, 6 years later. What are the chances? But we want to go, I'm just here randomly. My fear is this: if you and I don't start paying attention to where we've been positioned, everything in God's initiative for us is going to pass us by. You're like, Ben, I have so much on my plate. I hear you. I hear you. We're trying to lead this church. Sean and I are raising 4 kids. Baseball season just started, which adds 70 dates to our calendars for the next 3 months. I hear you. But if we miss it, if we don't ask why, if we don't ask what have I been given, if we don't ask where have I been taken to, if we don't ask why am I here and how did I land this, and if we only answer even those questions with, just because, then it will pass us by and you will miss it and you will end your life having missed out on the thing that God created you for. That would be tragedy. No matter who claps, no matter how many followers you get or how much money you hand out to the next generation in your family, that would be tragic. So what's the mission you're going to assume for your life? Because every one of us are making our lives about something. Every one of us. What did Jesus assume his mission to be? Grand mission or mini mission? If you got that one wrong at church, we would have to just stop the service. I think Jesus had a mini mission. But in his life, even Satan, I'll show you in a moment, and his disciples and his greatest enemies at the crucifixion, they all thought that what he was choosing to live out was a mini mission. Satan takes him into the wilderness for 40 days so that he might tempt him. And he says this to him: if you will just worship me, you can have all of the kingdoms of this world. Grand mission, grand mission, grand mission. Jesus says no. The disciples, when they hear that Jesus is going to suffer and that though he's that Messiah, he's going to allow himself to suffer and die, Peter and the rest are like, not over our dead bodies. That's mini mission material, Jesus. That's not grand mission that we expected you to be on. When he's being mocked and ridiculed as he's on the cross, his accusers say this to him: Jesus, if you're really a grand mission God, if you're really the Son of God, get yourself off the cross. But if you have a mini mission, I guess you can't do that. And it was because he had a grand mission that he couldn't get himself off the cross. Mark 10:45, for even the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve and to give his life as a ransom for many. Does that sound Esther-like to anybody? What are you giving your life for? Where's it headed? Where have you been placed? What have you been given? What are we going to do with it? You see, I've become convinced more and more that there are no accidents, that it never should end with me, that God's put some things in my hand. He's given me some relationships to steward. He's given me some resources to steward. He's given me some positions to steward, and he's given those to you too. And the question he just wants to know is, what are you going to do with it? What What am I going to do with it? What are we as a church going to do with it? We know that it is not by accident that God gave us this space. It's not by accident that God has given us the gifts. Are we going to sit Sunday after Sunday? Are we going to keep it to ourselves? Or are we going to deploy the things that God gave us for the sake of what he's doing in the world and for the sake of others? You see, Jesus came to give his life for many. That was his grand mission, even though it appeared to some like it was a mini mission that he seemed to be on. He laid down his life so that we might have life, and then he invites us in, and he goes, hey, just like I lived out my mission from God the Father, I'm giving you an invitation to live out yours. Let's live it out. I said at the beginning of this message, everyone makes their life about something, or another way to say it is everyone lives for something. What are you going to live for? What course changes do we need to make? And some of you, for the very first time in your lives, we're hearing so much about how many seekers are going in this season of our church. Hey, I don't have faith in Jesus yet, but I'm so interested. We started this church for you. But I know some of you have been in that process, and as you've made progress towards understanding Jesus, would today be that day for you to go, hey, the first step for my grand mission is to go, Jesus, here's my life. You can let us know that after the service. You can mark that on your card. But for the rest of us who are Christ followers, are we living in line with the kind of mission that he lived out, or are we settling for something else, no matter what it looks like to everyone else? Would you pray with me? What's the mission you're going to assume? You're not here by accident. You've not been given what you've been given just to be given what you've been given. You've not been positioned just for the sake of the position. We've got to be the kind of people who put into play what God has given us. As you evaluate why you do what you do, how you do what you do, is it more mini mission material, or is it that grand mission narrative? What is God prompting your heart right now, that in this one moment, a decision by you, a decision by us, it could change the trajectory not only of your life, but it could be used for so much good in the world. God, come and move us to the position you want us to be. But God, help us to already see that you have moved us to certain positions, certain relationships. You've given us resources. You've given us roles at companies and spots to serve at in this church. God, help us to make it for what matters most, for today, for this week, for all eternity. God, may we not be in line with the countless numbers of people who will live their entire lives and never lean into their God-given mission. Make us different in that way. In your name, Jesus. Amen. Would you stand as the band leads us in a new anthem that comes around this idea that, Jesus, you're worthy because of who you are, because of what you've done, and because of what you've called us into. And guys, let's go for it. He's worth it.